We had a bunch of our wedding outdoors. And we're talking about a wedding today in the Bible verse. So as you have a wedding outdoors, you have to plan for other things to happen. And what we had outdoors was on this little kind of park area, and we would have some lights, we would have music, we had it all ready to go. And as we went that morning to set things up, we plugged everything in, and that's where we discovered the problem. There was no power. It's hard to run a refrigerator, a popcorn machine, lights, and other stuff without power. Power changes things, and we were able to make enough phone calls, and by we, I mean my brother-in-law handled that, and we figured our own things out. And having the power to run all those things changes the experience of being outdoors, having the power show up. And that's kind of what we see in today's text. Everything at the wedding, especially when things start to go south, everything changes when power shows up, power that's already there. Now, as we think about this wedding at Cana, I hope it is a familiar passage to you all. It is a great story, but as much as we can, let's try to imagine it anew. Let's try to imagine it without all those things that we know ahead of time, because there are some rich, in-depth things happening here. The book of John is the disciple of Jesus. He's the one who will be referred to as Jesus' closest friend, the one who Jesus loves. John is likely writing his story last. He's the longest surviving disciple of Jesus. So in some ways, he's saying, you've heard all these other versions of the story. Well, let me tell you mine. And his happens in a very different order, because that's how they did history then. History was less about everything lining up in an exact order compared to things being a good story. Just the same way we do movies and other stuff now. That's how all history was done, not just biblical history. We'll rearrange things so that it tells a good story. So as John starts out with, in the beginning was the Word made flesh, and then it carries on over to pointing to John, the other John, the baptizer, preparing the way, and then to these disciples starting to follow Jesus. Then we have Jesus entering the scene for the first time at a wedding with these people who are already following him. And it says right away, on the third day. That's not an accident. Well, first off, it's reminding us that weddings are a little bit different. When Jen and I got married, we were married in February, and then we had our wedding celebration in August with all our family and friends. We went on a little honeymoon. And then, since we decided things were going so well, we moved in together at the end of October. This is a rhythm required as you're crossing a border, but it's probably a little bit closer to what weddings would be like at that time. There would have already been a long process getting to here, and now it is this feast that's happening over many days, and it says on the third day. So I want you to put on your Bible curiosity hat of some sort and think, what does third day reference to, right? We're seeing a lot of references in this passage, both back to creation itself in Genesis and to this resurrected new life in Jesus, the third day. Something special is happening. So it says, on the third day, Jesus is there, and something's happened. They're running out of wine, which for those of us with Baptist sensibilities is uncomfortable because, as we know, people should only be drinking grape juice. And that they run out of wine, and the story goes this way, and the way history goes, I mean, there's a lot of wine in this story. And they're running out, and we get to see something special, because in all of the gospel texts, we get to see Mary often interacting with angels. Joseph is interacting with angels, but we don't get to see this interaction between her and her son like we do here. Something special is happening. We get this little glimpse in. And so we have the men and the women separate at a wedding. That's the way it normally was, kind of like an old Mennonite church separate from each other. And so Mary's not even supposed to be over there talking to Jesus. So she goes over. She has discovered they're running out of wine. And what that means is that the family putting on this wedding is probably too poor. They did not have enough resources. It's going to be a great embarrassment for them, for their family honor, that they weren't able to treat their guests the way that they wanted to. They were not prepared for the amount of people that were there. And so Mary sees this is happening, and Mary, again, Now we're seeing her later in life, Jesus almost at the age of 30, all of these years, almost growing up together. She was so young having him. And now she's, well, I know who can fix this. And so she goes to Jesus publicly, which, again, not supposed to do. And she says, they're running out of wine, Jesus. And Jesus' response always read to me kind of like, Mom, like I'm not supposed to be doing this stuff yet. It's not yet my time. And even the language there, as we see woman, like it kind of always rubbed me the wrong way, but there's a gentleness to the language. And not only is there gentleness to the language, there's some reflection going on all the way back to Genesis. We see now the woman as the one who isn't just taking and pulling us into sin, but as the one who is going and engaging and bringing about the redemption and new hope of this family. And so she says, well, there's this wine. He's like, I'm not supposed to do anything now. Don't do that. And she goes and does what? She talks to the servants, and she says, and this, I think, if you remember nothing else, remember the theological wisdom of Mary right here. Do whatever he tells you to do. And so the servants, well, okay, they go to Jesus. And Jesus, well, I got to do something now, I suppose. So Jesus says, how am I supposed to make this better? And Jesus is a little bit more mischievous, I think, than we sometimes think. Jesus often has a way of looking for these religious rules, these religious practices, and turning them upside down in funny ways. And not only that, what we see all through the Bible is God, when God interacts with God's people, God doesn't just go and do things. God partners with his people to do these things. So Jesus looks around and he thinks, what's over there? These big, giant jars that are used for ceremonial washing. You would wash your hands probably in them. Maybe they would have had some foot water in them at some point. These are gross, kind of dirty water jars. You don't drink things out of these jars. It's dirty religious water. And he looks over, and note that the text also tells us how many there are. There's 6. 6 being an incomplete number, 6 being the number of humankind. One bit on the third day, if you look through creation, what's created on the third day are the plants. So there's all these rich, interconnecting things going on. So Jesus looks over, he sees these 6 dirty religious washing containers, and he thinks, that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to partner with these servants. And the servants who just have Mary's word to go on, and maybe whatever happens in their interaction with Jesus, they just do what he says. Fill those things up with water. Well, okay, I guess everyone needs to wash their hands again. Okay, Jesus, we filled them all up with water. We still have run out of wine. He said, well, you're going to go and pour that dirty religious water in a cup. You're going to take it to the most important person here and serve it to them. This is a bad idea. If you get in trouble at a restaurant here, you might lose your job. If you get in trouble as a servant or as maybe a slave, there are much harsher consequences for messing up in that time. But they do it. There's something about Jesus, there's something about Mary that has convinced them that, okay, I guess we'll give this dirty religious water in a cup to the most important person here. And as they do it, it says in the text, the water has turned to wine as he drinks it. It's happening. Jesus isn't going over to the water and touching it and making it wine. It's happening as these people are serving it somehow to this person. And then he's so taken back because the wine is so good. You know the difference between when you buy the $10 box wine and the $20 box wine. There's a big difference. So I'm told. We don't splurge. And it references that normally you save the worst wine for last, which in some ways makes sense. Everyone's been having it for a while, they've experienced it, and they've talked, and then we'll slowly water it down, and it gets worse, worse, and worse. But you have saved the best until last. This is surprising. Wow. And the disciples, how do they respond in this? Well, they were already following Jesus, but now they believe in him. It's one thing to understand or to think something. It's another thing to experience it. It's another thing to drink the good wine and go, wow, we saw this happen. And this all happens quietly, too. The rest of the people around the wedding don't all know, just the servants, the people around Jesus, and Mary. Mary, did you know? She knew a lot. And she encourages Jesus to step out in this new way, in a way maybe that in the text implies he doesn't quite want to do, but he'll do anyway. You see, the trouble for us is, for too long, in a world where our God, where Jesus offers us the good stuff, the good wine, we have become accustomed to drinking in the dirty religious water. This dirty, polluted religious water, and we're told that it's good. And so we tell other people it's good, even though sometimes it doesn't taste quite right, and we can recognize that, but it's refreshing enough, maybe. And there's something about this dirty religious water that makes it hard for us to really celebrate, right? You don't have a great celebration around dirty water. And as this dirty water gets to be a part of us, we should start getting used to it. And in some ways, there's almost this reflection of the wedding in Cana going on there. They were always used to things just getting slowly worse and worse and worse. And that's kind of what happens with us. We get used to this dirty religious water. And if any of us had ever had wine, the good wine of God before, we just kind of get used to it slowly being watered down. This watered down faith that over time just becomes less exciting. That over time just becomes these religious practices that maybe we don't even know why we do those things anymore. Well, we've always done it that way. And when we look through our world, particularly as Christianity makes its way to TV and to other stuff, and my general response is if you see a pastor on TV or hear them on the radio, you should ignore everything they have to say, with the caveat that I was on the radio once a month in Nebraska, so maybe take that with a grain of salt, what I'm saying too. Follow us only in so much as we follow Jesus. And there's something about religion and that dirty water that makes us comfortable because we can control it. We can take those big pots, and we can put them in the corner, and we can get them out when we need them. It doesn't change the way we do everything. It kind of gets compartmentalized. And very quickly, with this dirty religious water, we end up conjuring up a Jesus or a God who hates all the same people we hate, hates all the same things we hate, is mad about all the same things we're mad about, and loves the same people we love. A God who gives judgment to those who are different than us, but grace to us and to people like us. And it really has diluted our Christian faith. That we would be known not so much by how loving we are, but more often we're known by the things that we're angry about. The number of times we've heard Christians say, I love you, but, as if love is something we get to define onto the other person instead of how they receive us loving them. And in this story, I think Jesus is pointing to this new thing that he's doing. Again, no accident that it's happening on the third day here. We're seeing a different kind of resurrection, this new good wine being offered. Because Jesus doesn't want us to drink the old, dirty religious water. Jesus offers us the good stuff. The good stuff that is so infused with spirit, with fire, that it leads us to celebrate. It leads us to be joyful, to this party that they have. It leads us to want more. And our hope is in Jesus because even in that moment at Cana, where he took those old, dirty religious stones and water, he was able to take the dirty religious water and make it into the good stuff. That our God can still show up even in the midst of us getting mixed up into what we're trying to drink and can show up in some amazing, powerful ways. So for us, I like looking to the people in the story because there's a bunch of people and what their responses are. And the first group maybe is the disciples. What's their response? They drank and they believed. as they experienced this new change, it changes them. They were following Jesus before, but now they have their faith in him. And then we see Mary, who, again, theological depth to this woman, as we see all through Mary's song in Luke, as we see even in this text. Mary, who goes and sees the problem, knows that Jesus, when he shows up into a situation, can change everything, and encourages her son to do something about it. And her great words to the servants: do whatever he tells you. And then we have the servants. The servants who really have no reason given in the text for them to believe Mary, though she sounds very convincing, or even Jesus. They go kind of step along the way. Okay, we'll fill these things up with water, and now you want us to do what? But in their experience with Jesus, in their experience with Mary, somehow there's a trust that forms, and they do it anyway. They go and they do the thing that doesn't make any sense, and very much could get them in trouble. Not just losing their jobs, but could even put their lives at risk. This is not a prank that you pull. But they believed. And because of that, the water turns to this good, great wine as an act of their faith, of what they're doing. They get to be partnered with Jesus in that. And this is what the kingdom of God is like, right in the story. It's the good stuff showing up in surprising ways. It's the joy and the desiring of more, and it's this party that invites others in, not because we are so religious and want people to follow our exact religious ways, but because we are so loving and embracing as a community that people long to be around that. That the fire and the spirit inside has us so different. We're so loving and kind. We're so changed by the Spirit that people long to be around that. And that's what Jesus' church is called to be. We're not called to be a religious service once a week at a building, which is fortunate when it's raining. We are called to be a people of celebration, a people of the good stuff, who, just like the servants, takes that good wine and offers it to others to taste and see that Jesus is good. You don't have to understand how the wine gets made to enjoy it. But as we enjoy it together, we can start to delve deeper and deeper into what it means to follow Jesus. So may we do as Mary said. Do whatever he tells you. That is following Jesus and having our faith in him. May you experience the good stuff.